What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to My Social Life. This is the podcast where you can hear the real stories behind the people on social media. I'm your host, Jacob Kelly. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan, and today is an episode of The Social Report. And The Social Report is an episode in conjunction with Trufan where we sit down and talk about some of the most interesting news in social media and influencer marketing from the last 30 days. As always, today I'm joined by Trufan Chief Marketing Officer Karen O'Brien and Chief Growth Officer Scott Birdie. I'm very excited to have you both back on the podcast. I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas to everybody listening because this episode will be dropping on Christmas morning, as that is the final Friday of the month. But welcome back to the podcast, both Karen and Scott.
Thank you, Jacob.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah. Might be the episode that we cover a little bit more than what happened in the last 30 days, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe
365.
Yeah. But around the start, I think my stories actually fall within the last 30-ish, maybe a little bit more than that. But recently, the first story that I kind of wanted to talk about initially was Reddit acquiring Dubsmash to keep up with the title of the article was Reddit acquires Dubsmash to keep up with TikTok Joneses. So this is Reddit's first ever acquisition. I don't know if you ever looked at Dubsmash. I've looked at it kind of prepping for this interview, and it looks very similar to almost like a scaled down version of TikTok, essentially is how I kind of explain. More so focused specifically on dance and the skits and stuff that TikTok's focused on. So this is Reddit's first ever acquisition. They'll integrate the Dubsmash video tools into Reddit. Dubsmash actually was a lot more prominent than I thought. They have 1 billion monthly views. I mean, when you compare it to TikTok's 37 billion, it's pretty small, but 1 billion monthly views is still a pretty big number. And in the article too, they talked about how something that I was interested in, this is kind of where I'm going to throw it to you guys, is they call the big picture at the end of the article. And it's Reddit's 2020 was a quest for more marketers to flock to the platform. It has created a trending takeover ad product, invested in new ad verification tools, doubled down on brand safety, and now it's setting its sights on user-generated video content because that's what it takes to keep up with an ad platform Joneses of 2021. So my question for you two based on this is, one, of course, what do you think of the acquisition? But two, what are you hearing from marketers when it comes to marketing on Reddit?
I mean, I'll just say Reddit in general, I think is a huge opportunity for a lot of marketers that they haven't really spent a lot of time exploring. Like every platform, they have their, early adopter or long-term faithful marketers. But I think in general, there's a ton of activity on Reddit. A lot of marketers are aware of that. They're not all sure how to actually leverage Reddit for their particular segment. I think that's changing. Reddit's trying to do a lot to entice marketers, but I don't think that most marketers are familiar with how they can really reach their audiences there.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I myself wouldn't be very familiar on how to very effectively reach audiences on that platform. I mean, I think we've tried bits of things even with Trufan over the past, trying to seed it in the right types of communities and stuff like that, or when certain go to markets would be happening, attempts to just find communities, and even I don't know, for marketing, look into it just even purely for research's sake is probably a great way to start using it if you don't fully know how to leverage the power of that community, just because there's so much being said and a constant feedback loop being generated on the platform. So I think from that front, I mean, I'm sure they've always been quite useful to marketers, but on how to use it, I think there's probably only a handful out there, who really have those types of proven strategies that have worked and scaled on that platform. I don't think there's necessarily a recipe on how you can do that, because I think that's the whole purpose of the platform, as far as I understand it, is you have to be very authentic, and it has to be kind of bleeding into the community in the right way. You can't really force those things. And so I guess I view that almost like a similar type of outlook on Twitter, where, there's probably some brilliant marketers out there who have had stuff work in the past, but today, you're going to have to do something new to really stand out if you're somebody who's wanting to carve out a presence on Twitter. And coming out with that new thing, or how to do exactly that, you can learn from people in the past, but typically it still has to have some newness to it. So you got to be innovative, and you got to come up with something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've only spent a little bit of time on Reddit myself. I think it's super powerful, but there's a fine line, organically at least, there's that fine line between navigating it as a marketer, because you don't want it. If you come across promotional on Reddit, you're not going to do anything. But if it's something that you can walk that fine line, not come across too promotional. People resonate with it. Like Reddit's super powerful and you can get a lot of traction there. And one interesting thing that I've seen marketers or just entrepreneurs use for Reddit is to see what's trending and where opportunities may lie. There's a website, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it tracks the fastest growing subreddits. So you can see just within culture and like what's trending and what people are interested in, because as people like, so for example, in the beginning of quarantine, like bread making subreddits might have been popping because everyone was starting to get into bread making. So you can identify these trends and what people are interested in by looking at how fast different subreddits grow, which presents opportunities that you can take advantage of then.
There's a fantastic subreddit on COVID that exists that a lot of scientists are on, and I think they see it as a neutral, safe space to be able to put up data. So it's been highly credible in a lot of people's opinions. So there's areas like that, and there's probably 1,000 areas like that.
I think it also kind of feeds off the back of their social channels. You know what I mean? Like when you achieve virality on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, like inevitably there's going to be people, giving their take on how things went down or what they're thinking on what Reddit. And I guess that's the sort of, maybe in terms of the question around the acquisition, like that's probably where Reddit is trying to like find opportunity is in the line of like, how do we allow creators to kind of like, natively, organically, like start content out on Reddit if they are trying to seed it in that way. Trying to fit in with like it says it right in the image of this article, right? Like I love the image there because I want to fit in. And when you look around, we talked about this, I think, in the last episode. All the social media sites or platforms are doing relatively similar things to one another. So I'm sure this isn't like Reddit's attempt to do that because they haven't really like followed suit and piggybacked on like, every single strategy that they've done before. But it's probably their attempt to say like, hey, we'd love to see content start and grow on Reddit as opposed to kind of like finding its way to Reddit after it's already reached, the focal point or the tipping point on the internet.
And that's an interesting point too, because I think with Reddit is it's for the most part it's anonymized. Like people they don't use their real names on Reddit, which is interesting because then like you don't go on Reddit to follow specific people. You go on Reddit for the subreddits and the community. So it's going to be interesting to see how do they replicate what other social networks are doing when they're very much like personality driven, where you follow specific people or specific companies. Whereas Reddit's you follow different communities, and it's that community aspect that keeps people coming back.
Interesting. It could be like an interesting cross between sort of like Twitter-esque, content and profiles and like a mix of like actual people standing out for a reason or just having like really like interest-based or sided accounts that actually create content like around the type of like, side they've chosen on some certain topic. Um, that'd be interesting to see. I mean, I myself don't use Reddit that much, like only for, like Karen said, the basic news topics that like you really just want a bit of information on and like the latest. Um, I would definitely be like intrigued though to like start using it more often if there was a way to like find the subreddits that I'm going to enjoy a little bit easier. Like, I don't know. I haven't gotten into the depths of that platform yet. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, no, me neither. I've like
Cool.
experimented and poked around on it, but not like an active user every day or anything.
I think one of the things that struck me as I was like reading through some recent content and especially a lot of like the kind of year end articles that are summarizing certain trends that we're seeing in 2020 or are potentially emerging in 2021 was this sort of conclusion that this year, and there certainly has been other years, like we can draw upon a bigger recession in 2008, but like this year, just due to how this sort of recession or quarantine and COVID taking place in March was met with such like a change in consumer behavior, and how since that's now stuck around to where we are now, moving into 2021, that like as we do move into 2021 for whether it's social media marketers or just marketers at large, it's probably going to be one of the most daunting years. In terms of like meeting expectations versus what you're receiving to meet those expectations. And it really spoke about how, this requires innovation. Like innovation will have to be a big part of what marketers do in 2021. It's a lot of 20s getting thrown around. Um, but that prompts something interesting to me because, there could be a lot of trends that we're talking about, right, coming into this year. However, we don't really know what that sort of like leading trend may be as we get, midway through the year of 2021. Because even looking back at like some of the past trends, I mean, email has apparently seen a hike, this year, which is obviously going to fall in line with the trends of like first party data importance that you spoke about, Karen, and that we've seen on some, emerging articles in the past couple months. So that will probably trend in the right direction, right? But like, how to where does that then get met with innovation? Is that like things like Player, or is that different ways of A/B testing emails now and stuff like that? Messaging has obviously been a major part of the sort of shift, especially on the consumer side, where like adults are using more messaging apps more regularly, and the time that they're spending on that daily is going up. So like there's all these trends, but I suppose with the very basis of marketers are basically getting budget slashed. They're probably not coming into 2021 with what they had in 2020, or not an equal uptick for certain areas of their budget, right? Combined with the fact that expectations probably remain the same or are getting lifted in terms of online sales, e-com sales, ROAS, and ad targeting. Uh, so it's going to require a lot of innovation. I mean, I would love to know what you guys think of that, and if there are any sorts of trends that have happened or that you believe will continue to emerge as a result of that sort of innovative push that's happening.
I mean, I think one of the big trends that we're seeing obviously is, you know, the push towards first party data, and that's something that's near and dear to our hearts. Um, but I would also say, one of the things that's going to drive that is, the cookieless future. Now, when we talk about cookieless future, we're really talking third party cookies, right? So Chrome is going to get rid of third party cookies. Your first party cookies, which is basically your website traffic, cookies are going to remain the same. It's really the third party annoying cookies that a lot of marketers rely on for targeting or retargeting, pop-up ads, a lot of the annoying stuff that a lot of us don't like, is going to go away. And I think the reality of that going away is going to shock some marketers that are not prepared for it. In tandem, that's going to drive a lot more need for first party data. So we say first party data, we mean data that you own on your customers. So I think, in tandem, another trend is privacy is tightening up at the same time. As marketers are trying to gather more data on their customers want that data to be within their control, and they want to know who's going to get it and what it's going to be used for. A lot of things converging at the same time. So I think, I don't know, have any of you thought about your experience as a consumer and cookies going away? Will that affect you in any way?
I mean, I assume I'll probably start getting a lot more random ads if cookies are going away and they can't like service ads that are specifically to me, which obviously could negatively impact my experience on different social platforms if like they don't have the same data they once had, that they can't micro target as bad as they could. The ads are probably going to start to become a little bit more random and not necessarily things that I might necessarily resonate with, which in turn, like I said, will kind of ruin my experience as a consumer on social platforms.
That's an interesting point to bring up. I would almost argue that you could start to see a little bit of the opposite. Like you may start to receive ads that are less, I mean, like this will really just be the interesting part of like how marketers are reacting and how quickly certain brands are reacting in comparison to their older strategies. I mean, like I'll use an example, not to throw a company under the bus, but they're a huge company doing a lot of good things as well. Adobe, however, I would say is probably, I don't know who does the performance advertising. This is just a shot in the dark, but I've been targeted like when we first started Trufan and we purchased a bit of like Adobe software and their monthly suite package or whatever, there was like a period of 2 or so years that I was like retargeted with their ads after purchase. And it wasn't like a thing where I went on an evaluation stage. Like it was like one day we needed Photoshop and Illustrator. So we purchased Photoshop and Illustrator. I went on, bought it, been paying for it ever since. Right. And I think it'll be a lot of the same where like or how quickly can marketers and performance marketers delineate the difference between new cookies and new leads and current customers, and have really powerful marketing engines doing some of that automated work in the short term? Because frankly, using ads budget, if there's a limited budget out there to increase conversion, uh, it's going to be harder if you have less cookie data or less lead data to go on. So if all you're getting is the lead data from website visitors, many of which who will probably purchase if they're actually going to that website for a specific reason, that's just kind of where like you're either going to be targeting net new, or you'll have to quickly delineate like who's in the funnel that hasn't yet purchased, so it is worth retargeting at that point. Because I would argue that like any money you're spending retargeting customers, if budgets are cut and you're trying to increase conversion, is going to, it's obviously going to be pushing you in the other direction, and it's not going to achieve the desired results. So like you may find you're seeing stuff for websites that you're visiting pretty frequently just because that's the only data they have to retarget versus target net new. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Karen?
As a marketer, I cannot wait to see this happen because I think there's a lot of crappy marketing out there as a result of marketing cookies and just enabling people who shouldn't be doing marketing to be able to do it. So I would say that I think, I mean, one evidence of that, right, would be the amount of influencer videos that are out there saying, hey, I'm going to do a video on every product that's been trolling me in my Facebook feed, right? Where there was one I watched a couple of weeks ago where an influencer literally got 60 ads targeted at her for maternity wear. Was she pregnant? No, she was looking for a gift for a friend who was pregnant. 60 ads. And the hilarious part of this was she actually liked the product, but when she clicked through, it was sold out. And she still kept getting ad after ad to the point where she basically said, stop wasting your ad dollars. And I think that's just such a good example of like the crappy ads that basically just keep coming, even though you're not the target. So I'm personally excited about it. I think it's going to put marketing back in the hands of people who have some skill around data and segmentation and actually want to understand customers. Having said that, I do think it's going to result in the rise of more influencer marketing because that is one easy path to getting to an audience that you want to reach is to leverage an influencer who has influence over that audience. The other trend that we sort of plays into all of this is that digital ad budgets are actually going up. The overall marketing budgets are going down, but the percentage of digital within it is going up. So traditional dollars going down, digital ads still going up. So with cookies going away, privacy going up, digital spend going up, I think it's a perfect storm. So companies are going to have to get really good about understanding their own audience in digital, and they're going to have to put some rigor into really collecting first-party data and having a value exchange around their customers.
It's also probably going to add some emphasis on just not necessarily community building, but strengthening the brand and the connection that those people have to your audience. If you can't get in front of new people as easily, like it's going to become an even higher priority to try and reconvert people for a second, third, fourth person and increase their lifetime value.
Building community and being social is going to become a priority again, not just slamming ads to the bottom of the funnel.
And there's such a demand right now for just content in general. So yeah, the need to kind of meet that content. I've seen it. I mean, there's some trends that were just released by Forbes. Just kind of general. I mean, I think these were more insights based on the year. But it talked like the first two are basically video related. I mean, the first one is literally like video content is exploding, as if that was something that needed insight. Yeah, but yeah, I guess it's true. Maybe the number one thing coming out of 2020 is more video. But the second thing right on there is TikTok can't be stopped, and there's a lot of interesting trends to back that. But I think the sort of interesting part at the bottom of that trend is where they mention how brands can benefit is basically TikTok is more of an informal platform and is thus well suited for pandemic life where many people seem to crave connectivity and realism. We've spoke a lot about TikTok in the past. So that makes a lot of sense. But what's interesting to me to note as a trend is I've looked across certain segments, and in many cases, there's like one or two, brands in that market segment that may be on TikTok and regularly creating TikTok. And then there's going to be like a handful of the other like high competitive competing brands that aren't actually creating very much on TikTok. However, many of those five will be seeding content before they've actually started their brand page with influencers. So like it's I mean, the most interesting, I guess, thing to me about that is that unlike Instagram, or some of the, kind of more traditional social media platforms, brands are actually seeing value in using influencer marketing before they start to create organic content because they realize how much more that connects with the consumer, the types of, ROI it can generate in a shorter period of time. And if you have a budget, I mean, especially like you said, Karen, where digital spend is actually increasing on a lot of these different platforms, then that's just an outstanding way to actually spend your budget and also remove the sort of complication around, hey, how do we actually create a TikTok strategy or sort of some sort of content calendar when we probably can't like create an in-person team at the moment, which makes it it's a difficult platform to create on if you don't have much like in-person or studio assets. It's like either kind of agency outsource for that type of stuff at the moment, or just kind of find a TikTok creator, pay them to start as a consultant and see what you can kind of generate in terms of, I guess, that just trying stuff and experimenting on the platform. So I know that's been really interesting to notice for me is the fact that they're actually starting with influencers instead of creating their own account. I mean, when you're paying influencers and they're not even tagging anything, like it's purely for brand awareness.
Yeah. I think it's a great route to go for brands because you can test out the platform without a huge commitment to content, as you mentioned. But also, when platforms are emerging like TikTok is right now with brands, the influencers a little more flexible and open, right? Like it's not like you have to reach out to find a TikTok influencer. It's not that hard,
Yeah.
and also, they're somewhat open to working with brands without you having to talk to their manager, without like exorbitant fees, right? And we saw that with some of the direct to consumer brands. They're just thriving with TikTok influencers. The reach they're getting, or just literally exchange of product and some sort of revenue share is just off the charts.
There's not as much education there yet. Like whereas with like Instagram and YouTube, like it's like there's a lot of people understand how to price themselves at least a little bit better than TikTok. But TikTok's almost like the wild west right now, where people don't even know what to charge, how much to charge. Like, is exchange of product enough? Like, oh my goodness, they're going to send me free clothing. Like that's crazy. Of course I'll do it. Like they don't understand that they're almost being taken advantage of in some cases.
Hmm.
Well, that combined with like the second or third and fourth trends in this is basically focus is shifting to the collective good. So more of like peer messaging for brands and influencers, which pretty easy to pick out, as a trend is like, hey, people are a little bit more prone or open to receiving messages that generate comfort as opposed to the opposite. But the second one there, brands are seeking deeper long term relationships with influencers. Again, I don't think you need a microscope for that insight. Like we've talked about that on several different podcast episodes. But to your point there, Jacob, like savvy brands, with heaps of different creators to message and just trying to play the numbers game with, can really start to generate an organic content team with little to no budget. I mean, it's just the reality. I mean, you may not reach the millions or like those influencers that actually can reach millions just as a result of posting on their page and actually going to need to pay for that. But I think right now there's a lot of TikTokers that are actually almost looking for ideas as much as they're looking for like content partners. So like giving them both a product plus a few ideas that you may have, brainstormed with XYZ people internally, it just kind of like gives them something to say, okay, well, now I can try this. And then they'll see if it might be the right type of partnership for them. But by giving them that product, you see how much they like it or how kind of like authentic that relationship is. You can try to move forward with that over a shorter period of time, until maybe you do, feel comfortable enough to start to spend the budget.
Hmm. If you're really large, yeah, if you're a really large brand that still spends money on linear TV, there's a lot of them out there. And they don't have sports anymore, so they're kind of looking for places to put their money right
Yeah.
now. There's a spectrum of video that is addressable. So in other words, like, can I reach my actual target customer in live TV and measure it versus digital video where I know exactly who watched that? And there's a
Yeah.
spectrum of sort of a connected video strategy and all the different permutations of video that exist along that spectrum of how addressable, how can I find my customer? And so I think what you're going to find with TikTok is there's a lot of brands moving into that who might have bought in live television But now they're looking at TikTok and saying, I can get the same reach and scale on TikTok. And it's pretty much as targetable as my live television was at this point.
It's true.
Right? But it's like 100 times cheaper. So
if not like
I have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a younger customer, if you're a brand that's looking for a younger customer, maybe you were spending money on sports sponsorship, live television dollars, and the most you were able to say is that I can target a millennial male customer in that. And that's pretty much, and impressions and reach are all you can actually get back from measurements and viewing. And TikTok's a great alternative then, because you know that you can get that on TikTok and you can get it cheaper and you can get it faster.
So true. I mean, I'm just going to bring up the last trend here because I know it links back to a story that you brought up for this episode, Jacob. It was partnering with employees can help build advocacy. So maybe we just lead into that story now, and you can tell us a great example of how some brands been doing that.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Walmart's kind of influencer marketing with their employees program. It's called the Spotlight program. That's how they've branded it. And they have about 500 people enrolled across the company. Like, I think it's just the United States right now. It's a relatively new initiative to turn. So basically, the article says it's to turn Walmart workers into small scale influencers. And so they began testing it this fall. So they just started in the fall and it's already at 500 people. And so what they do is they take the employees and turn them into public-facing advocates. It's kind of grown out of, they had a program called Walmart's My Local Social program, which was getting members of different stores to run the company's social pages as volunteers. So they didn't have to pay for, so they had individual social pages for all of their different stores. And now this influencer marketing thing has kind of grown out of it. Um, the vision of this is to make it the world's largest employee influencer program. And so right now, only salaried employees can become influencers with intent to kind of scale that out into more of the rest of just like the part-time employees and stuff. But so what Walmart did is they recruited some of their top My Local Social ambassadors to turn them into these influencers in the Spotlight program. And what's super interesting on top of that is, so they've kind of fleshed out this program where they'll give you products or different things, but they've also kind of built out internal materials for the people within this Spotlight program to have access to. So one of them, they have their own podcast. I have it written down here somewhere, but they have their own podcast essentially where they do different interviews with people to kind of provide tips and tricks for these brand advocates, these influencers to kind of level up their social game. But they also have an internal app that they've created for these people part of this Spotlight program where they can kind of track their performance. They can send out different challenges. So for example, like they'll send out a dance challenge for the people to do on their TikTok account. And they've also done things where brands can come through, like if you have a product in Walmart, you can like partner with the Spotlight program to incentivize these people to do promotions for specific products. And then like the top 10 people will actually get paid for, like if you have like the top post, you'll get paid a certain amount. Like the top 10 people will get paid for promoting specific brands. Now brands can partner with Walmart to just reach out directly to these people in the Spotlight program to incent to create these influencer marketing campaigns. It's really interesting. And what else I have written down here on it? I don't ton of notes. I probably have too many notes here. But yeah, so for example, back to the money, I think they each received $200 cash for the top 10 people for a brand called Funko. Another thing on top of this program, with the Spotlight program and the My Local Social program, they have a quote here from someone in the company saying, people who raise their hand to become social champs end up becoming our next level leaders. Clicks to bricks is what they call it. They get promoted faster, they get visibility faster, and they're happier. So my questions to you is, what are your thoughts on the company influencer programs as a whole? What makes an effective influencer marketing program? And what do you think? Yeah, just thoughts on this Walmart Spotlight program.
I don't really know what it takes to build a quote unquote successful, employer or employee influencer program. I'm sure Walmart, by the sounds of it, will be leading the way in terms of how to scale that type of effort. It's been seen that Wendy's reposting a video of an employee making like a Baconator received more than 3 million views. So we get why I'd say they're doing this. I think the first part is, like you said, to help with the education in terms of products and help with the awareness of products. And I think at a hyper local scale, which I'm glad you added that in at first, because I think that has a lot to do with making this successful at scale for a brand, especially the likes of Walmart. is actually leveraging, the people on the kind of bottom end of that like influencer pyramid or whatever you want to call it, is like people who are so local and have such little like uh, I guess like actual influence over the internet, right? They actually influence the people around them and who are within their network, to the point where like, a message on their page, especially as it gets started, is probably like word of mouth. I mean, it's especially at this point when everybody's at home, like you're probably not talking as much with the local community around you or your local peers and stuff. So when they see stuff online, they're going to like actually take that, and probably run with it, you know what I mean, a lot more than they would with typical influencers who are local to those regions. So as a result, you get this like direct awareness literally with your local market, and the ability to educate them in like a first person view of an employee who seems very happy, and very like, you know I guess into their job. So there's an extra reason to like go shop at Walmart. There's a lot of like little tiny check boxes, right? That like I think Walmart really looked at this through a strategic lens and said like, how will this benefit us at a very localized level? Now, I think at a broader level, I would argue that I think for Walmart, probably one of the most strategic objectives of this whole thing is to expand their vendor relations, or like their the different buyer or products that get sold at Walmart's, right? So like their seller relations, I guess is what it would be known as. On a broad scale, going back to what Karen was talking about earlier, which is getting into the sort of awareness bucket for TikTok or even Instagram, I suppose, for their employee program. When you have that sort of ability to kind of backdoor the perfect type of influencer for your sales strategies and goals in particular locations and storefronts and things like that, I mean, what better way to like differentiate yourself from the targets and stuff like that out there, when you're looking to incentivize new products to sign like an exclusive deal. It's like you'll have access to our employee advocacy program or whatever it is, and like that's just a drop mic moment when you're the size of Walmart. So I think they're probably looking at it, from like a incremental building standpoint, and how to reach more consumers. But I think in the back they're also thinking about how can we build more strategic relations, with the people who matter most to us, and bring more value to them. Because it's one thing to be Walmart, it's another to be one of those little smaller sellers that doesn't really have much of a name out there on a consumer facing side, because you get bought at Walmart, so you can build that as a result of being at Walmart. I think that's powerful.
Yeah. One of my favorite employee advocacy examples is Cameron at Walmart, right? On TikTok, I think he was one of the first at Walmart that really sort of just went for it and created an audience. And I think he really got the attention of Walmart executives and probably changed some thinking in that area. There's been a lot of great examples of employee advocacy programs over the last 10 years and a lot of failed attempts. I think most companies that attempt to put together a social advocacy program for their employees fail. And that is because they fail to get scale. And when they do get scale, it's usually not very authentic because they've tried to over engineer it. One of the better ones that I've seen was REI a good 5 or 6 years ago. Started listening to customer questions on Twitter and then had their employees answer them on social, right? They used to do little videos of, hey, Scott, you asked a question, what can I buy my dad for under $50? He likes fishing or whatever it was. And then they had local REI employees actually answer those questions on video. And I thought that was super authentic. I think that the company or the brand that can tap into that and do it well is going to dominate retail in the next year, honestly, if they can scale it. If Walmart can scale it and they can sort of step out of the way and just enable their employee advocates, they will dominate. I think like I said, where it's failed before is, companies are afraid to put their employees out front because they're afraid that they may not represent the brand in the way that they want them to. They also have, there's sort of two parts to this, right? It's getting employees to share the kind of marketing messages or opportunities or products that you would like them to. And then there's the other side of it, which is enabling your employees as creators. And not all employees as creators will create in the same way or will create the way that you might want to want them to as the brand. And so it comes to the same kind of questions we have with influencers. How much do you want to tell them what to do? How much do you want to control them to be on brand? And how much will you just let them be authentic? So I think letting them be more authentic is going to be far more powerful with some guidance and maybe coaching from the brand on how to be a creator, not necessarily on how to be Walmart. So I think they have a massive opportunity in front of them if they can scale it and do it well.
If I may, there, I think what's super interesting about what you just brought up too, Karen, is this actually will give them a really unique point of differentiation from a hiring standpoint and as an employer brand as well for younger people. Because I mean, you don't have to go into many Walmarts to know that they, half of their workforce is probably made up of retirees, and those are likely not the kind of people who are going to be joining the employee advocacy program. I mean, I'm not. That's not like age discrimination. It's, I mean, you could just look at stats and like consumer
For
behavior.
sure. For
But
sure.
when you look at the flip side of that for younger prospective employees who they probably want to attract and have had most likely a difficult time attracting over the last decade, just due to the sorts of, I guess, optics Walmart has, right? As like a Walmart-ish sort of or McDonald's-ish sort of like brand and work experience. For many I've known, my younger cousin worked there before he joined like a tech startup at one point, but it was a great experience, like great work experience during school and stuff like that. But for them to be able to not only share that experience through the videos and things like that, but even as a creator, like if you were telling your friend that, hey, like I've been able to like go to Walmart and like, half the days I'm there, I spend a bit of time like creating TikTok videos and like working on, this creator side of like my Walmart presence. Like it seems way more interesting all of a sudden as like a young teen who's like interested in their first job. It's like, wait, like I can go there and I can start to create like some videos and stuff like that too. And to your point, Jacob, just bringing this back to what you mentioned, where like those people are kind of seen as their early leaders, or it gives them a quick eye on like who should we be paying attention to in the organization as potential growth, exists corporately. it, Seeing those people, climb the ladder, I suppose, and then having even those case studies or like kind of those, I forget what they're called, but or like an example or some. I don't think this is what they're trying to create, but that sort of success story to point to. It's like, oh, we have, Jen is like somebody who went through the program and is now one of our like, AVPs for APAC region or something like that. Just on all sides, like a great optics to generate. Yeah.
I think the other part of this is, you as a brand, you also have brand safety issues, right? So there's got to be guidance from the brand on, how much profanity can you have, and can you show two competitors' products together in a video, and can you give a bad review of a product if you truly don't like it? There's a lot of sort of judgment questions that are real that come up with these kinds of programs. I'd say the other part of it is programs like this actually have to be managed. You can't have this as 20% of somebody's job, which is typically what happens in a lot of brands when they sort of get it going. And so I think, Walmart looks like they're dedicating and investing and taking it seriously. So I think they probably have a much better chance of succeeding. So I'll be excited to see, 6 months from now, 3 months from now, let's check in and see what they're doing.
I was just going to say, I think to your reason around why a lot of these fail is because nobody really actually managing it as a program. It's kind of more just like a want rather than an actual objective or a corporate objective that will be set. And yeah, I mean, like when it's just a CMO or, somebody within the organization who wants to see it, it's like they can drive a bit of action, but like if there's no long tail effect or way to create the sustainability, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I know they are taking it seriously because they have contracted out to a company called Brand Networks. That's the contractor that manages both the My Local Social and the Spotlight program. So it's not just like someone internally is trying to manage this. They have like an actual dedicated company they're working with to run this program.
In retail in particular, I mean, sales associates are being asked to do a lot more than their actual job these days too, right? So it comes down to like how much time when I've sort of stood up these kind of programs in the past, one of the questions I've gotten early on is, well, how much time is this going to take? Because I'm already managing some social things for the company. I'm doing all these other list of things to try and help, go beyond my actual sales presence. And I would imagine with COVID, it's only gotten worse. A lot of sales associates are now virtually selling online, right? They're doing video consultations or FaceTime with consumers that can't come in a retail store.
Yeah, Lulu's
So,
been doing a lot more of that, I've heard. Yeah.
yeah, some companies where they've stood up these kind of programs too, there's an internal kind of competition. Like H&M, basically you had to apply to become a brand ambassador, and you had to show your creator chops, and you had to be able to show that you could basically speak on behalf of the brand. And there was a whole competition piece, which I don't think is a bad thing, because I think, you want those people initially in the program to raise their hands that are already kind of creator oriented.
Yeah, who are going out of their way to make content like in the first place. It's not like oh, here's actually something I can now like piggyback on or whatever. Like you want to
Or
be
people
interested in
just
it.
don't want to do it and they feel compelled for some reason to
Yeah.
have to participate. You don't want that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, like how they're going to navigate it if some of these people in the program start to grow quicker than others. Because what if they do? Because they're gamifying it right now, where it's like the top performing people get the cash prize. But if you have people like, I know Cameron from Walmart, I don't even think he's considered a part of this program right now, because I don't think he's a salaried employee at this point. This is only for salaried employees. But if they eventually open it up to everybody, if you have people like a Cameron from Walmart in this program who just, you have like the you have 10 creators that over index that are just miles and miles ahead of everyone else, they're going to get the cash prize every single time, which is going to decentivize everyone else in this program for even trying, because I know they're not going to get the cash prize. So it's like, how do they navigate that? Balance is going to be interesting to watch.
Very interesting. Well, good on Walmart, though. I think it's a great example of them trying to innovate. I always
Yeah.
applaud that.
Yeah. I think it sets a great standard, you know what I mean, to create moving forward. I've seen just when it comes to companies failing at this, like LinkedIn, just like those few years where it's just like everybody was a mad dash to start creating like organic content on LinkedIn. And just to your point, like the force, of certain, like the hand that certain companies would take. And it's like, for SaaS companies and stuff like that too, why not just, if you want the long tail effect of that, like just build a very slow organic approach to it. Like don't like tell people to start commenting on stuff or,
Yeah,
just cringe.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
So, wrapping it up, guys, I mean, what are your thoughts on going into 2021?
Well, e-commerce, that's just my
It's on
general thought
fire.
process. Yeah, it's like people are going to keep buying online. I read a stat on a report today. It said like, with all the numbers moving in the e-com direction, there's a pretty big study that was done with about 1,000 marketers, senior marketers, and 2/3 project that this like whole e-com shift from a consumer behavior side will be permanent. Like there's no going back. Um, and I mean, it looks like a lot of the sorts of consumer behavior shifts that have taken place, like spending more time on messaging apps, spending more time on social platforms, like continuing to just increase into the new year. So e-com, digital, yeah, it's just going to be the focal point of everything, at least until 2022.
Mhm.
One of my predictions was that you're going to see social media managers and the social teams in general rise. And I think we're going to see some powerful examples of that. We're going to see some former social leaders rising into CMO roles. And I would actually argue that they are the CMOs of tomorrow, because they're closer to the customer. They are day to day engaging with customers, understand customer perceptions of their products and their brands. And I think they will become sort of the focus of the marketing organizations going forward, particularly when e-com is going to start to dominate.
Some things that I'm looking at, I think an interesting thing for me on an influencer marketing side is influencers, instead of looking for influencer marketing deals, creating their own products or their own communities. Like I know Logan Paul has his like the Maverick Club, where it's like a paywall and you get a exclusive, kind of like a Patreon, but he built the program himself. Or looking at like their own products, like David Dobrik just launched his own perfume line. Obviously, they all have merch, but like these additional businesses, Emma Chamberlain did coffee. So it's like these extra businesses that creators are going to start to do it's going to be more work up front than just doing like a spot in a video or something like that. But on the back end, they're making so much more money, and then they're going to be in control of their own brands, and they're not reliant on other brands. They're essentially like, they already have the built-in distribution because of the audience they've cultivated, so they can take advantage of that. So it's going to be interesting to watch how influencers continue to go about, whether they keep looking for brand deals or if they make their own products. And the other thing I'm looking at now, granted, this is kind of dependent on vaccine and how everything unfolds in the coming months, but like in a post-coronavirus world, how experiential marketing, I think, is going to take a lift, because people, once they know they can safely leave their homes all the time, they're going to be looking for any way to do so. And so if brands can capitalize on that, deliver enticing experiences for people, I think that's going to be a big win.
Yeah. When do we think that's going to happen?
I have no idea.
If anyone had the proper prediction for that, I think they'd be some sort of government related position right now, with the health department or something. Like,
I'm going to call it.
who
I
really
think we're going to
knows?
have a whole other year, 2021, of at least some sort of limited lockdowns, because I think it's going to take a while for vaccines and all sorts of things to get out there and to see if they're effective. So I think that we're going to be going into holiday 2021 still somewhat limited.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think it's going to be at least another full year. And what that does mean, a couple other trends. One's that's in this article that Jacob can share, but gaming reaches a new level. Still, some advertisers are hesitating for that market, though, just because of how swiftly and effectively you kind of need to create campaigns. But it's interesting to hear that there's a clear opportunity for brands, as 36% of gamers say they tend to buy brands they have seen advertised. Like, that's a pretty bold statement. And then while gaming influencers on YouTube attract the most community engagement. So it's a lot kind of moving in that direction, I would say. And it seems like YouTube has put some significant resources and effort into bolstering I think their YouTube gaming strategy, but just generally the streaming that's going to be happening on their platform going forward. And then in line with that, connected TV. I think you kind of brushed on this earlier, Karen, but it looks like that is just going to be a continuously rising trend. And really, to your point about how you can understand more about who you're reaching and kind of target things a lot more effectively. But there was one story or one reference to, I think it was like a Viacom owned channel here. Pluto TV, owned by Viacom CBS and operating in over 20 countries, is one example of AVOD's success this year. I think that's a connected video provider of sorts. And then aggregating content from more than 200 different license partners allows the service to appeal to a wide variety of audiences while positioning itself as a digital product with TV feeling and TV approach. So data on the back end of that, for sure they're collecting that and creating, very targeted but wide scopes for who you can kind of attract into that top of funnel bucket, right? So
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
interesting.
Who do you think is going to not survive this digital transformation?
Unfortunately, a lot of small businesses. That's just the first that comes to mind, working with like Shop Here and stuff. But
Sad.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, all the restaurants that are closing is crazy. Like, it's just tough to to pay rent while only being able to do takeout, and it sucks.
I was reading an article about the guy in Washington, D.C. His name escapes me, but he's an immigrant that had a restaurant that was, basically serving thousands of meals to homeless and just anyone in need every month. And he was on the brink of going under, despite the fact that he was a super successful, very profitable business guy. And he put up a GoFundMe page that got $300,000 in donations almost within a couple of days. So I'm happy to see that he's not going under, but I think the restaurant industry is massively at risk. What about all the publications, the magazines, and that whole realm that used to drive? I mean, newspapers kind of died, but magazines, I never thought that I would see the disruption that's happening with them right
yeah. I mean, I saw Surfer magazine go under like almost a year ago or more now. It was early, but like then you have digital publishers and stuff. Like, I know one that you read quite a bit there, Jacob, is Morning Brew. A lot of people read it.
now.
They
Yeah.
got purchased this year. You know what I mean? So there's still those bigger deals, I guess, for those that are further and further behind. Like, carving out those sorts of digital audiences is valuable, right?
Do you think that those newsletter kind of generated publications are the new publishers?
I mean, yeah, big time. Like Shopify. almost all the main blogs, they almost reach you through email now. They're kind of email blogs. They're not so much. I'm sure they're driving a lot of traffic still, like Shopify, obviously, but yeah.
Then you see the resurgence of retro stuff like hard like books coming back and vinyl coming back, and there's a market for it. But when it comes back, I think they do it in a better way for a younger audience. You know?
Yeah, well, there's so many little things you can start to like drip in, that are more engaging or experiential, like Jacob mentioned, I think, to books. And that's where like just keeping an eye on strategies throughout 2021 will be interesting because there's certainly going to be some organic efforts that like really work in the first half of this year and will probably get copied a lot
Mhm.
by
Hmm.
other brands.
Hmm.
Yeah. One last point I will make just before we wrap things up. I know you got to jump off here, but in terms of like dripping things in and for an experiential, for like a physical book or something like that, I think a great strategy is using other mediums to enhance the story. Like for example, like I played a video game that I really, really liked, and they had an accompanying podcast that I listened to. There's an accompanying book, and I bought the physical book copy and I listened to the podcast. Just like increasing the experience by leveraging other mediums to enhance the original experience, whatever that might be. So if it's a book, like an accompanying podcast or something like that, you know what I mean? I think that's going to be interesting to watch moving forward.
I agree. I saw an example of that with Giant Step. They basically created some vinyl for W hotels, like W Hotel and other, hotel experiences, where they basically wanted a soundtrack in the rooms. Great.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. But anyways, I want to thank you both for taking the time here. We're a couple days before Christmas, so I appreciate you both making the time, and I appreciate everybody for listening, whether you've listened the entire way through and listen to bits and pieces. I really appreciate you taking time to check this out. If you want to follow everybody, you can find Karen at Bond Jane Bond, Scott at Scott_Birdie. You can find me at the Jacob Kelly, and the podcast at My Social Life Podcast. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to leave a positive rating and a review. As always, today's podcast is powered by Trufan. Thank you once again for listening, everybody. We'll talk soon.